What is Thrawn's grand plan? I mean, he's clearly up to something. He always is. Well, dear audience, having read all the Thrawn books, having watched Star Wars Rebels, and having watched The Mandalorian Season 2, I think I've figured out the Grand Admiral's plan. I have this feeling that Thrawn isn't necessarily working for the Empire currently, at least not with Moff Gideon's remnants. A little background on Thrawn first. Obviously, he isn't your average Imperial officer. Aside from being perhaps the greatest military mind in all of Star Wars, he is actually a Chiss. The Chiss are a species of blue humanoids who reside outside the galaxy in the unknown regions. He originally served the Chiss Ascendancy, but when he discovered the Galactic Empire and saw firsthand how powerful it was, Thrawn offered his loyalty to Emperor Palpatine. But Thrawn wasn't betraying his people. Thrawn's purpose was to forge an alliance between the Chiss Ascendancy and the Empire, an alliance that would serve to guard against potentially dangerous alien invaders that lurk in the unknown regions of space. So when the Empire collapsed and was no longer the machine of might that it once was, I'm not convinced that Thrawn would still be interested in serving it. This would mean that Thrawn is not, in fact, pulling the strings of the Imperial remnants. When we last saw Thrawn, he was getting stranger dangered by Ezra and some space whales. The fact that the Magistrate knew where Thrawn was means that he has now returned from being kidnapped, seemingly without Ezra. And if anyone knows where Ezra is, it would be Thrawn. And I'm almost certain that Thrawn knows exactly where Ezra is, and I think Ezra may even be working with Thrawn. At the end of Star Wars Rebels, Ezra seemed certain that blasting off into the unknown with Thrawn was the right thing to do. It seemed like he understood that his place was elsewhere. Almost like he knew he couldn't be present for the events of the OT or something. All jokes aside, I believe Ezra sensed some kind of impending threat to the galaxy. A threat that perhaps lies in the unknown regions. A threat that the Chiss are preparing for. If this were the case, it seems likely that Thrawn and Ezra would set aside their differences to deal with this threat. But that begs the question, what is this threat that they're preparing for? Just what exactly is out there in the unknown regions waiting to strike? If you're familiar with Legends, you'll know about the Yuuzhan Vong. In Legends, the Yuuzhan Vong were an advanced humanoid species from the unknown regions who attacked the New Republic and nearly destroyed it. While the Yuuzhan Vong have not been made canon as of this recording, there is another potential species that has been introduced in the Thrawn novels that may take their place. The Grisk. The Grisk are also an incredibly aggressive species that originate in the unknown regions. Not much is known about the Grisk, but they do share several similarities with the Yuuzhan Vong, such as being aggressive conquerors, being nomadic, and originating from the unknown regions. In the Thrawn novels, the Grisk make several minor attacks on the Chiss Ascendancy, both directly and by proxy, using other species that they'd already conquered to do their dirty work. However, by the time of The Mandalorian, perhaps that has changed. Perhaps the Grisk or the Yuuzhan Vong saw the Empire being torn apart by the rebels and took the opportunity to move against the Chiss, now standing alone without their allies. This would put the Ascendancy in an incredibly vulnerable spot, and they desperately need their tactical genius Thrawn for such a conflict. And Ezra.
But why?
Patience, Grand Admiral, I'm about to tell you. You see, space travel works a little differently in the unknown regions. There are no reliable hyperspace lanes to travel through. The unknown regions are constantly shifting and changing. In order to travel great distances at hyperspeed, the Chiss rely on children known as Skywalkers. Ironic, I know. These children are special amongst the Chiss as they possess force sensitivity. It is for this reason that they are able to guide the Chiss ships through hyperspace. Unfortunately for the Chiss, these children lose their force sensitivity as they grow older, typically losing it completely by their early teens. For the longest time, I had no idea why this happened. But then Ahsoka said something interesting in her appearance in The Mandalorian. She said that Grogu's powers would fade if he went untrained. The Skywalkers are not subjected to formal training with the Force. They're simply used by the Ascendancy for navigational purposes and then cast aside when they can no longer use the Force. So, you can see now why Ezra would be invaluable to Thrawn and the Ascendancy. Ezra can not only navigate the Chiss warships through space, but he can train the Skywalkers, allowing them to keep their Force powers. Thrawn, on the other hand, has served alongside Darth Vader and fought against Jedi during his time with the Empire. So, he would no doubt respect the abilities of the Jedi and the Sith. I believe Thrawn wants Ezra to train the Skywalkers to be much more than mere navigational systems. Can you imagine how deadly an army of Force wielders under Thrawn's command would be? I think that the Grisk or the Yuuzhan Vong would have such a difficult time conquering the Chiss Ascendancy if that were the case. This is what I believe Thrawn's grand plan is. Honestly, I was surprised by just how well it all fits together. It just makes sense. But we'll likely have to wait until the Ahsoka series begins to see if I'm right. But what do you think? Am I right about all this, or do I sound like a raving lunatic?
Closer than you think, Captain.
Appreciate it, Thrawn. Please remember to like and subscribe. It helps the channel out so much and it makes our day. Anyway, I'm Zach, and I'll see you in the future.